Namaskar students. Hope you are hale and hearty, taking care of your health and your studies. My name is Jyotsna and I am from Education Department, Chandigarh. I shall be with you in today's session. 15th August 1947. What does this date remind you of? Yes, very easy for every Indian. It's a matter of pride. This is the day we attained our freedom. But was it the first struggle for freedom? No. The first struggle for freedom took place around 90 years ago, 1857. Yes, that's what we are going to analyze today. In this session, we will take up grade 8 book, Our Past Part 3. Chapter number is 5 and the name of the chapter is When People Rebel. The Indian Rebellion of 1857 was a major but ultimately unsuccessful uprising in India. In 1857-58, against the rule of the British East India Company, which functioned as a sovereign power on behalf of the British Crown. The rebellion began on 10th May 1857 in the form of a mutiny of sepoys of the company's army in the garrison town of Meerut, 40 miles, somewhere 64 kilometers northeast of Delhi, now Old Delhi. It then erupted into other mutinies and civilian rebellions, chiefly in the upper Gangetic Plain and central India, though incidents of revolt also occurred farther north and east. The rebellion posed a considerable threat to British power in the region and was contained only with the rebels' defeat in Gwalior on 20th June 1858. On 1st November 1858, the British granted amnesty to all rebels not involved in murder, though they did not declare the hostilities to have formally ended until 8 July 1859. Its name is contested and it is variously described as Sepoy Mutiny, the Indian Mutiny, the Great Rebellion, the Revolt of 1857, the Indian Resurrection, and the First War of Indian Independence. In 1772, when Vaughan Hastings was appointed India's first Governor General, one of his first undertakings was the rapid expansion of Company's army. Since the sepoys from Bengal, many of whom had fought against the Company in the Battle of Plassey and Buxar, were now suspect in British eyes. Hastings recruited farther west from the high caste rural Rajputs and Bhumihar of Awadh and Bihar, a practice that continued for the next 75 years. However, in order to forestall any social friction, the company also took action to adapt its military practices to the requirements of their religious rituals. Consequently, these soldiers dined in separate facilities. In addition, overseas service considered polluting to their caste was not required of them, and the army soon came officially to recognize Hindu festivals. This encouragement of high caste ritual status, however, left the government vulnerable to protest, even mutiny, whenever the sepoys detected infringement of their prerogative. Stokes argues that the British scrupulously avoided interference with the social structure of the village community, which remained largely intact. Civil rebellion was more multifarious. The rebels consisted of three groups: the feudal nobility, rural landlords called talukadars, and the peasants. The nobility, many of whom had lost titles and domains under the doctrine of lapse, which refused to recognize the adopted children of the princes as legal heirs, felt that the company had interfered with a traditional system of inheritance. Rebel Leaders such as Nana Sahib and the Rani of Jhansi belonged to this group. The latter, for example, was prepared to accept East India Company's supremacy if her adopted son was recognized as her late husband's heir. In other areas of central India, such as Indore and Sagar, where such loss of privilege had not occurred, the princes remained loyal to the company, even in areas where the sepoys had rebelled. The second group, the Talukadars, had lost half their lands estates to the peasant farmers as a result of the land reforms that came in to wake up annexation of Awadh. As the rebellion gained ground, the Talukadars quickly reoccupied the lands they had lost, and paradoxically, in parts because of ties of kinship and feudal loyalty, did not experience significant opposition from the peasant farmers, many of whom joined the rebellion to the great dismay of British. It has also been suggested that the heavy land revenue assessment in some areas by the British resulted in many land owning families either losing their land or going into great debt to money lenders and providing ultimately a reason to rebel. Money lenders, in addition to the company, were particularly objects of rebel animosity. The civil rebellion was also highly uneven in its geographic distribution. Even in areas of north central India, they were no longer under British control. For example, the relatively prosperous Muzaffarnagar district, a beneficiary of a company irrigation scheme, and next door to Meerut, where the upheaval began, stayed relatively calm throughout. Several months of increasing tensions, coupled with various incidents, preceded the actual rebellion. On 26 February 1857, the 19th Bengal Native Infantry Regiment became concerned that new cartridges they had been using or issued were wrapped in paper greased with cow and pig fat, which had to open by mouth, thus affecting their religious sensibilities. Their colonel confronted them, supported by artillery and cavalry, on the parade ground, but after some negotiation withdrew the artillery and cancelled the next morning's parade. Months of increasing tension coupled with various incidents preceded the actual rebellion. Now let's discuss all these reasons in a little bit of detail. Let's first take up how Nawabs lost their power. Nawabs and Rajas lost their authority and power since the mid 18th century. In order to protect their interests, many ruling families tried to negotiate with the company. Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi wanted the company to recognize her adopted son as their legal heir to the kingdom after the death of her husband, but the company turned down all the pleas. Awadh, on the other hand, was one of the last territory to be annexed. In 1801, a subsidiary alliance was imposed on Awadh, and in 1856, it was taken over. The company planned to bring down the Mughal dynasty to an end. In 1849, Governor General Dalhousie announced that after the death of Bahadur Shah Zafar, his family would be shifted out of the Red Fort and given another place in Delhi to reside. After Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal king, none of his descendants would be recognized as the kings. They would just be called princes. Now the next reason came with the peasants and the sepoys. Peasants and zimidars from the countryside represented the high taxes and the rigid methods of revenue collection. Many lost their lands as they failed to pay back the loans to the moneylenders. The Indian sepoys, who were employees of company, were unhappy about their pay, allowances and condition of service. When sepoys were told to go to Burma to fight for company via sea route, they refused to go but agreed to go via land route. The company passed a law in 1856 which stated that every new person who took up employment in company's army had to agree to serve overseas if required. Responses to reforms. The British reformed Indian society by passing laws to stop the practice of sati and to encourage the remarriage of widows. English education was widely promoted. After 1830, Christian missionaries were allowed to function freely in its domain and own land and property. A new law was passed in 1850 to convert into Christianity easier. The law allowed Indian Christians to inherit the property of their ancestors. Now, how this mutiny became a popular rebellion? A large number of people believed that they have a common enemy and rose up against the enemy at the same time. For such a situation to develop, people have to organize, communicate, take initiative, and display the confidence to turn the situation around. In May 1857, English East India Company faced a massive rebellion. In several places, sepoys mutinied, beginning from Meerut, and a large number of people from different sections of society rose up in the rebellion. It is considered as the biggest armed resistance to colonialism in 19th century. Now, how it moved from Meerut to Delhi. On 29th March 1857, Mangal Pandey was hanged to death for attacking officers in Barakpur. Some sepoys of regiment Meerut refused to do army drills using the new cartridge, suspected of being coated with the fat of cows and pigs, hurting the religious sentiments of the soldiers. On 9th May 1857, 85 sepoys were dismissed from service and sentenced to 10-year jail for disobeying their officers. The soldiers released the imprisoned sepoys from the Meerut jail on 10th May. The soldiers were determined to bring an end to their rule in the country. The sepoys rode all night of 10th May and reached Delhi in the early hours next morning. Triumphant soldiers gathered in Red Fort demanding to meet Badshah. Bahadur Shah Zafar accepted the demand and wrote letters to all the chiefs and rulers of the country to come forward and organized a confederacy of Indian states to fight the British. The Mughal dynasty had ruled over a very large part of the country. Small rulers and chieftains controlled different territories and they were threatened by the expansion of British rule. The British thought that the disturbance caused by the issue of cartridges would die down, but the entire situation changed dramatically by the decision of Bahadur Shah Zafar. Now, this rebellion, how did it spread? The British were routed from Delhi, and for almost a week there was no uprising. Regiments mutinied, and troops joined nodal points like Delhi, Kanpur, and Lucknow. Nana Sahib, the adopted son of late Peshwa Bajirao, proclaimed himself Peshwa, gathered armed forces, and expelled the British garrison for the city. In Lucknow, Birjis Qadar proclaimed that the new Nawab. In Lucknow, Birjis Qadar proclaimed the new Nawab. In Jhansi, Rani Lakshmi Bai joined the rebel sepoys and fought the British along with Tantya Tope, the general of Nana Sahib. In the Mandal region of Madhya Pradesh, Rani Avanti Bai Lodhi of Ramgarh raised and led an army against the British who had taken over the administration of her state. The British were defeated in a number of battles. A situation of widespread popular rebellion developed in the region of Awadh in particular. Emergence of many new leaders, for example, Ahmadullah Shah from Faizabad, Bakht Khan in Delhi, Kumar Singh in Bihar. The company fought back. The company brought reinforcements from England, passed new laws to easily convict the rebels. In September 1857, Delhi was recaptured and the last Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar was sentenced to life imprisonment. In March 1858, Lucknow was taken and Rani Lakshmibai was defeated and killed in June 1858. Rani Avantibai chose to embrace death when surrounded by the British on all sides. Tantia Tope was captured, tried, and killed in April 1859. The defeat of rebel forces encouraged desertions. To win people and their loyalty, the British announced rewards for loyal landholders who will continue to enjoy traditional rights over their lands. If anyone who rebelled against the British surrendered themselves and if they had not killed any white people, they would remain safe and their rights and claims to land would not be denied. This all led to some very serious aftermaths. By the end of 1859, the British had regained control of the country. Some of the important changes that were introduced by the British are following. First and foremost, in 1858, a new act was passed and transferred the power of East India Company to British Crown in order to ensure more responsible management of Indian affairs. A member of British cabinet was appointed Secretary of State for India and made responsible for all the matters related to the governance of India. He was given a council to advise him, called the Indian Council. The Governor General of India was given the title of Viceroy. Through these measures, the British government accepted direct responsibility for ruling India. The next major change which came was that all ruling chiefs were assured that their territory would not be annexed in future. They were allowed to pass on their kingdoms to their heirs, including adopted sons. The Indian rulers were to hold their kingdoms and as subordinates of the British crown. The proportion of Indian soldiers in the army were reduced and the number of European soldiers increased. Muslims' land and property were confiscated on a large scale and they were treated with suspicion and hostility. The British decided to respect the customary religious and social practices of people of India. Last but not the least, policies were made to protect landlords and zamindars and give them security of rights over their lands. As we can see that the rebel of 1857 gave a strong foundation for the freedom struggle which carried on from here on. And finally, India attaining its freedom on 15th August 1947. It owes a lot to the sacrifices carried out in 1857. Hope today's session was fruitful for you. Let's try to analyze what exactly have you extracted out of it. Now, on your screens, you have a statement. Along with that, you have 4 options. You have to pick the correct option. So let's get going. A few reasons for the failure of revolt of 1857 are given below. Suggest the one that is not considered as reason for the failure. First, Hindus and Muslims fought together even though the British held to keep them divided. Second, they used outdated weapons. Third, the leaders were neither organized and united nor properly trained. Last option, the educated class of the Indians were loyal to the British due to their selfish intentions. Yes, it's option number 1. The Hindus and Muslims fought together even though the British tried to keep them divided. Moving on, in 1849, Governor General Dalhousie announced the death of Rani Lakshmibai, Bahadur Shah Zafar, Nana Sahib or Tantia Tope. Yes, it was the announcement of the death of Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor. Question number 3. What was the new amendment in the law in 1856 passed by East India Company. Every person who took up employment in company's army had to pay a tax. Every new person who took up employment in the company's army will be paid only a low salary. Every new person who took up employment in company had to agree to serve overseas if required. Every new person who took up employment in the company's army had to collect the revenues set by the British. The correct answer is option number 3. Every new person who took up employment in company's army had to agree to serve overseas if required. Very good. Good going. Moving on, a few important changes in the Indian Army are given below after the revolt of 1857. Which one according to you is true? The army was reorganized and strengthened. Very few soldiers were recruited from Awadh, Bihar, Central and South India. More number of soldiers were recruited from Gorkhas, Sikhs and Pathans. The number of Indian soldiers were increased and European soldiers reduced. The correct answer is option number 1. The army was reorganized and strengthened. Now on your screens you can see a picture. Recognize this able personality from Awadh who led the revolt from Lucknow along with Maulvi Ahmadullah. झलकार भाई, रानी लक्ष्मीबाई, बेगम हजरत महल और कित्तूर चिन्नम्मा. Begum Hazrat Mahal is the correct option. On your screen you can see set of words in 2 different boxes. You have to match so that they make sense. So Mangal Pandey is related to Barakpur, British Queen, was a sovereign paramount. Madhya Pradesh, Rani Avantibai Lodhi belonged to Madhya Pradesh. Ahmadullah Shah was a Maulvi. Very good. As I always say, queries of our present often find their answer in our past. In 1947, we attained freedom, but the strong foundation was laid down way before, 19 years ago to be precise, in 1857. Many people sacrificed their lives. And finally, in 1947, India became a sovereign. We are proud of our country and we shall continue to be. We'll be back with many more videos. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy and keep studying. Namaskar.